Call this meeting to order. If you please rise and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Lunder,
Here.
Mrs. Thompson. Here. Mrs. Moore. Here. Mr. Shaboo,
Here.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here. Approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of council, April 26, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bittner for approval, seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Correspondence. Clerk, do we have any correspondence tonight?
I have no correspondence tonight.
Does any member of council have correspondence tonight? Mr. Morris.
President Johnson, I have actually three documents here. One is, I believe everybody got from Mr. Earl Curris on 7523 Lake Road, or Salida Road. It says, "Dear members of council, I would like to thank everyone in council for allowing the residents of Benner Lake to have a voice and share with you our experiences and ideas and desires for our community. A group of residents came together and created a version of the proposed PUD that we see as fitting our neighborhood. See attached copy. We were disappointed to notice that most of our suggested revisions were not adapted to your latest revision, creating the zoning by the zoning committee on May 2nd, 2022. That included the eliminate multifamily housing or apartments, only allow owner occupied dwellings, reduce the number of units per acre permitted, maintain setback minimum of 35 feet as per previous version. Home ownership creates an entirely different type of resident. As a homeowner, we are financially invested in our residents, development, and community. We tend to be more involved and stay in our homes longer to raise our families and create long-term friends. We care if our neighborhood is becoming unsafe, unclean, and not maintained. If a home were to be rented, we would make sure it is taken care of. As a homeowner, we have a vested interest. As well, homeowners within the community will ensure that any home rented out would be maintained. An example of how home ownership is working in Mentor on the Lake is with Monterey Bay condominiums on Salida Road. We enjoy going for a walk in this little community. It has always been clean, safe, and attractive. The owners care, and it shows. Simply compare this to the existing apartment buildings in Mentor on the Lake. As homeowners and residents, yourself, please do not allow high-density rental buildings close to the street on prime land that we must all live with. Let's have a community to be proud of, not afraid of. Sincerely, Earl Curtis." The other one is another email that went out to all of council. It says it's from Andrea Johnson. I'm sorry. It says, "Hello, I am writing to you as a concerned community member and homeowner in Mentor on the Lake. I understand our council members have been negotiating with developers who are interested in developing parcels of land in our neighborhood. One proposed parcel is a church lot on Andrews Road. I understand the developer wants to build yet another Dollar General. Did you know that there is a tremendous amount of research out there that shows us why dollar stores are bad business for our neighborhoods? They are a detriment to the community, and many counties in Ohio and across the nation are now banning them. They're terrible for the health of poor people, offering no fresh or healthy foods, thus perpetuating unhealthy habits. Additionally, other low-cost items are poorly made and end up in landfills. Most dollar stores are insufficiently staffed and quickly become cluttered and messy inside. The Dollar General, less than 5 miles from here on Lakeshore Boulevard, is just that. Inside is a terrible, mismanaged, and cluttered. The exterior bushes died 2 years ago. They have yet to replace them. I don't know one community member that believes we need yet another dollar store. Please consider a moratorium on dollar stores and save our neighborhoods from future demise. Secondly, I understand the council is in negotiations with a developer for a PUD overlay that will allow for the building of residential rental units at the corner of Andrews and Lakeshore Boulevard. I am not opposed to developing that parcel with the owner occupied upscale condominium units. However, as a concerned member of the community, I am deeply concerned about the proposed development for multifamily rental units on multiple levels. Below are just a few. One is losing commercially zoned property means residents will carry higher tax burden going forward. 2, developers and owners not based here aren't vested in our community, yet receive monthly payments from our citizens. 3, tax abatements result in our tax base losing revenue and non-residents make money on us. And the fourth one, it appears the city is already higher than the natural average of residents living in rentals versus private ownership. I understand that the land at the corner has been vacant and not listed for sale on the open market since 2018. Please consider listening to the concerns of the constituents in your neighborhood. Best regards, Andrea Johnston from 7523 Salida Road. And the last one I have, and thank you for bearing with me, comes from Mr. Wayne Plus at 7744 Fern Drive. Starts out constituent input with regard to another dollar store in the city. The proliferation of junk stores speaks of the type of neighborhood some of the leadership believes the city to be. Stores offering quality merchandise should avoid the area, seeing the saturation of slum shops in the area, further degrading the neighborhood and elevating certain leaders to the level of self-fulfilling prophet. That's all I have.
Hey, does anybody else have correspondence? Yes. Mrs. Johnson.
We all received a email from Rhoda Erdogan on 7607 Salida Road as well. To the mayor and city council members of Mentor on the Lake. I'm a 14-year resident and homeowner of Mentor on the Lake. I moved from Sagamore Hills in Summit County and experienced somewhat of a culture shock of what I consider to be a lack of effective zoning. There is a preponderance of apartment dwellings here. The community I moved from was 80% owner-occupied dwellings. In the morning, I see a disappropriate number of students waiting for the school buses outside of the apartment buildings. After reviewing the per student cost in the Mentor school systems, it is clear that my property taxes are paying for this renter-based population of school-aged children. Also, renters do not have the same vested interest in our community as do homeowners. Unlike my previous community, there is a preponderance of dollar stores in our area. Near my home in Mentor on the Lake, there are 3 of these discount stores and 5 more not too far away. By contrast, in Sagamore Hills, there's only 1 in the entire community. This control and development was due to city planning and well-considered zoning. As you must be aware, these dollar stores provide low-quality goods that do nothing to improve the community's image or provide quality goods for the people that frequent them. While we cannot stop a new dollar store from being built on the property already zoned commercially, we do need to make it more attractive to potential buyer by allowing the rest of the parcel to be rezoned, allowing the building of even more apartments. As the mayor pointed out at the last zoning meeting, there's only 2% undeveloped real estate in our city. Why wouldn't we take this time to work together to create a vision for our community that would encompass a more upscale and desirable place to live? Developers and dollar store owners are only concerned about profits and increasing their cash flow. They don't live here and have no vested interest in the image of or quality of life in Mentor on the Lake. Although the city does have a website on which to post important issues, it is not user-friendly and does not always keep pace with the developments. Clearly, the city could make more of an effort to communicate with citizens when there are issues. As important as the development of more apartments, dollar stores in our community, the lack of transparency may not need maybe be internet intentional, but it is worrisome. It is also clear that there is a lack of coordination and cooperation between council and committee members. At the last zoning meeting, they did not seem to be on the same page, which was extremely confusing to the general public. As was pointed out at the last zoning meeting, there's a vacant Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee. I'd be happy to serve on this committee and know of several other knowledgeable and creative residents that would be willing to do so as well. We are excited about the possibility of working with the city fathers to plan a brighter future for our community. Because of the current controversy and lack of tax-paying citizen support for the 2 projects involving rental units and a dollar store, I strongly suggest a moratorium on these above projects. The cities of Toledo, Brunswick, North Royalton, and even Cleveland have recently worked with moratoriums to enable a better city plan. A 6-month moratorium would give the mayor, city council, zoning board, and city residents time to work together on a vision for our community. With only the best interests of our community, respectfully, Rhoda Irvin.
Hey, anybody else have correspondence tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to administrative and department head reports. Mayor and Safety Director, Mr. Eva.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson, members of council, public here this evening. I'll start off with the fire department report for April. Of the month of April 2022, there were a total of 103 calls for service, 21 fire service calls, 82 rescue EMS calls. Of those 82 calls, 17 calls were for invalid assist. There were no calls in April requiring Narcan. On April 9th, fire department held its annual Easter egg hunt sponsored by the Monroe Lake Firefighters Association. Those celebrating the service anniversaries in April, Battalion Chief Catalano, 30 years, firefighter Anamia, 17 years, Lieutenant Langford, 14 years, firefighter Clemps, 5 years, firefighter Padley, 5 years, firefighter Medlock, 2 years, firefighter Kovach, 2 years, and firefighter Sunbone, 2 years. Public council received from Mrs. Bartone on May 3rd an email discussing the second round of SID funding. And I'll just go through the public real quick. The second round of SID funding is now open for petitions, which must be received by May 31st to be included. The stairs and lower portion of the deck are now completely inaccessible. The portion of the top deck, we being the service department. Late last year, in an effort to save what we could, however, it wasn't safe enough to securely access any additional sections. Additionally, the playground is approaching a dangerous distance to the erosion area. If the playground has to be closed, we will have to dismantle it. It cannot be reassembled due to its age and condition. The neighbors to the east of Lova have either completed or are in the process of completing their revetment walls. We're still waiting for CT's cost estimate. But as we talked about, Mrs. Bartow and I have talked about, we know that the cost is going to go up dramatically from the estimate in 2017. So right now, we can't give council an estimate, but what we're asking now is for council to agree to submit to petition the SID board that will be included in round 2. This petition doesn't obligate the city to borrow the money. It signifies our intent to join the SID. The next step would be to finalize the amount needed and then pass legislation approving borrowing the funds and assessing the property, which would be spread out over the next 15 years. There were photos attached. I do have the photos if anybody from the public would like to see. But by looking at the photos, we can all tell that the park is. Mr. Lyons at some point will draft a resolution for council to consider. But again, it will be something that we can pass at the next council. I also received from Mr. Ralph Bloomer, reference at 5995 Cedarwood Drive. And this was an email, a letter that went out from the Board of Trustees at the Cedarwood Beach Club. And I'll just kind of summarize this. Dear club members, if you recently visited the club, you have noticed how Lake Erie continues to batter our shoreline. Within the last couple of weeks, and this is dated May 3rd, we lost 2 more trees from the east hillside, and there's a picture of this. The Board of Trustees continues to face the challenge of our eroding shoreline. Over the past couple of years, we have researched the programs and funding currently available to shoreline property owners. Earlier this year, the Board of Trustees member June Gary contacted our local congressional rep David Joyce. The congressman's response follows on page 2 and 3 of this letter. The board has already investigated several of the congressman's suggestions. Unfortunately, the cost to make the necessary improvements is an estimated $300,000, is beyond the club's financial resources. The Board of Trustees will continue to research a solution to our erosion problem. Should you have any comments or suggestions regarding this issue, please do not hesitate to contact one of the trustees. Our neighborhood has a wonderful park on the Lake Erie shoreline that benefits each of us. If one of your neighbors is not a member, please encourage them to become a member of the club. I did the math on the 300,000 over 15 years. Roughly, it's $20,000 a year. I'm not sure how many members are here, but I know Mrs. Thompson with the Meadowmarsh Beach Club, they're in the same situation. That without members in these clubs to help absorb, in this case, $300,000, it's going to be tough. But I just wanted to share that, along. And looking at, Representative Joyce did respond in a very positive way. He is working on legislation and, grant programs that you mentioned. But at this point, there's really nothing that's not good. Also, I want to thank Mr. Johnson for the quick turnover on the notes from last night. A couple things that I did talk to Mrs. Bartone about today. One of them was property management issues. And I've never received calls from anyone in any of the apartment buildings around us. And, my question to her was, have you ever heard of anything as far as property management issues? And we have not had anything as far as existing rentals or problems with property management. I've never received a call from a renter anywhere saying, hey, you know what, property management isn't looking at, my issue or anything like that. So I wanted to point that out. I sat in your shoes there for 9 years. And the 7 of you really have, some tough decisions to make. The only thing I can suggest is, and I think Mr. Bittner has talked about this, is go out and talk to the residents, or at large. Particularly, I would, and I mean this myself, talk to the residents on Park Street. Because in my mind, a development that goes on that corner there will affect them. But, I would. That's about all I can tell you. That's our report.
Thank you. Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening, and thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions for the administration? Mr. Morris.
There you go. I got one thing to try to clarify the error, a few things. At all these meetings, it seems to be brought up about, has the city done anything to cause the property owner down at that corner to clean up the boats and the property? Several statements were made that if that was private property or residential property, the city would have done it by now and sent them the bill. Has anything been, what has been done? Let me ask that, not has anything been done, but what has been done?
I have talked to the property owner, and Chief Dealing has worked with her to try to find the owner of the boats. The problem with the boats is it's not like getting rid of a car. It's disassembling the motor, the gas, and everything, and get that taken away somewhere that's going to destroy it. So that's kind of where we're at. I have not talked to her recently about cleaning up the property.
Have you or the service department looked at the city cleaning it and give her the bill for it?
No, I don't think we've talked about it.
Okay, and obviously from your response, there were rumors going around that the city took her to court and lost or something like that. That's not true, is it?
Not
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions for the administration? Okay. Moving on, board and committee commission reports. Ordinance Committee.
Ordinance Committee met on Thursday, April 28th at 7 p.m. We discussed ordinance 1242.11, section C, possibly adding an exception. It would be in regards to repairing the a section or post and having it to be a max percentage that we have not worked on that yet. We also talked about repairs and using other materials, like for example, if the current fence is wood, can they repair it with vinyl? Regarding permits, can the city put on file at the city surveys, pictures of mistakes before and after, and email the homeowner follow-up of inspection details? Trees in business district regarding green space and parking lots. We wanted to know how far off the mark is marks from following this ordinance. How can we find a solution for Giant Eagle, the gas station, Marathon, and suggestions for possible potted trees that can be moved for snow plowing season? We spoke about the possible moratorium of the church property. We put this on hold as a lot of information was just sent out before the meeting, but we wanted more time to review those documents.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Committee.
Yes, the Planning and Zoning Commission met May 2nd at 6 p.m. In attendance was Suzanne Cason, Mike Sweeney, Al Busher, Brent Moore, Dave Shaboo, Maggie Miller, Dave Eva, Jim Lunder, Michelle Moore, Kevin Bittner, Rob Johnson, Paul Morris, and numerous residents. Pelican Snowballs requested to move the dumpster location to behind their building. A cement pad will be installed with fencing on 3 sides and a gate in front. It was approved by the commission. The commission ended at 6:20 p.m. The next meeting will be June 6th, 2022 at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Zoning Committee.
Zoning Committee started at 6:20. The purpose is to review 1255 Lakefront Planned Unit Development District. In attendance was myself, Mr. Lunder, Mrs. Moore, Mr. Bittner, Mr. Morris, Mr. Johnson, and the Mayor Dave Eva, 20+ residents. The committee distributed copies of the revision of the 1255 Lakefront Planned Unit Development Proposal. The revisions included some changes that suggested by the public. Several residents voiced their continued concern. All residents have been encouraged to attend the summer's presentation scheduled for May 9, when residents, council members, and city officials will have the opportunity to address their questions and voice their concerns directly to the prospective developer. At this time, the committee has chosen to postpone offering any new recommendations regarding the matter as the issue warrants further discussion. Meeting ended at 7:45.
Thank you. Committee of the Whole met last night at 7 p.m. Presentation by the Summers Group with question and answers regarding the proposed rezoning and development of the parcels on the corner of Lakeshore and Andrews Road. Present were all members of council, the mayor, and members of the public. And that was it. All right. Open to the public. I will now open this portion of the meeting to the public. If you'd like to speak, please come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record.
Thomas Schaefer, 7701 Pinehurst Drive. I put a complaint in back end of February. The apartment or the house next to me is being rented out by an out-of-town people. They were supposed to cordon Holly. They were supposed to do a survey of the land. They never have. They open up one spot, one pin, and they didn't do the rest according to what Holly said. Nobody should be living there until this is straightened around. This has been close to 3 months, and nothing seems like it's getting done. I don't know if they need to be educated more on their job or what's going on, but it's nothing is getting accomplished.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak tonight?
Test term 7373 Salida. On the revetment issue, I was one of the homeowners on the east side of the lake. So I recently just was finished. That's within the last month or two. And Holly was really helpful in getting the SID application put through and everything. And I'll tell you, but I haven't even been a resident for 2 years. And when I first moved in, I lost about 5 feet in my backyard in the first storm. So I looked by myself individually, and it was gonna cost me $1,500 a linear foot to get the revetment done. And then when a few of the neighbors told me they were looking into it too, we did go in on the SID, and that it brought the cost down immensely. So I don't know if that would help for the park, because both east and west of the park, the revetment has been completed. But maybe for the, what did you say, Cedarwood Beach Club, I don't know if there's any existing properties that if they need revetment, it would be great to get a bunch of people in on the SID, because it really does help bring costs down dramatically. So just if you're looking to go forward with that in any way, it's definitely worth trying to find other people.
Anyone else like to speak tonight?
Scott Wolf, 7573 Salida, Mr. Mayor, members of council. First of all, I want to thank you all very much for your patience and time and listening to all of us as a group. Thank you for bringing in the summer group yesterday. I think for people who were here last night, it was extremely helpful to have the builder here to at least be able to ask him some very direct questions. I was extremely pleased that I felt that we had a great deal of support from council last evening in terms of voicing neighborhood concerns from the community directly to the builder with your voices. 2 members of council had very direct questions for him. One in his definition of what he described as rental homes, and it was brought up that you can still call it what you want, but a rental home is still an apartment. And so his definition of home may be somewhere where someone has an abode that they reside, but we're still talking about rentals. I was very happy to hear another council member speak up specifically and ask a very direct question: if the Summers Group would be open to the concept of owner-owned, occupied residences as opposed to rentals only. So clearly, you are listening to our voices, you are listening to our concerns. We greatly appreciate that, and it lends incredible credence when it comes from council asking Summers Group than individuals in the community asking it. We can only ask so many questions. Again, you ultimately hold the ultimate decision to the PUD overlay. And so to hear you voice statements that I have heard multiple times by multiple community members in the last month was incredibly reassuring. I want to thank you on behalf of us for that. Also, Mr. Johnson specifically made an incredibly important comment that I'm not sure that everyone heard last night, because there was a lot of things that were being said. But the comment that I heard you make, Mr. Johnson, that made me incredibly pleased once again was the fact that one of the residents directly asked the Summers Group very specifically, does the Summers Group have a timeline for this project? Because we had heard during a zoning and planning committee meeting that there was no timeline. During the Zoom session of that, the Summers Group brought up the fact that no, there is a deadline. We asked that question to a member of the community directly to them. They replied, yes, they do have a deadline. And Mr. Johnson immediately afterwards said, although the developer and the builder may have a deadline, City Council and the City of Mentor Lake does not have a deadline. I greatly appreciated that comment. I'm sure other members of the community appreciated that comment. And although it was a 1-sentence comment that was made, and I'm not sure everyone in the room heard it, I heard it. And I really appreciate that. That was tremendous, okay? Because that tells us that you are listening to us and you are supportive of your community members. So those things, I think, more than anything, mean the world to us as a group. And it's an olive branch that we can work together. Again, I thought Tess made a beautiful statement last night of what a PUD means to a community, and that a PUD goes beyond a piece of paper that describes technical terms only, but she described the fact that a PUD is something that works to the betterment of the community and the betterment of all of its residents as a whole. And that kind of goes beyond just saying, we're going to put up an apartment complex, a rental home, whatever they want to term it, that it goes into a big statement for that. I also heard nice comments from council, again, stressing at least the concept of mixed use, which is something that we have all talked about. I also had a nice discussion with one of the council members after the meeting. And I think there's a clarity point that I think I understood better after that conversation. I'm not sure everyone in the community understands. And so I'll voice it in the way that I understand it. And if council wants to weigh in and clarify that to the members of the community, I think that would be very appreciated. One of the things that we have all brought up on multiple occasions is the concept of mixed use and the concept of a community development plan and the concept of an overall city plan. And that there are several parcels of land that make up the residual 2% of property that has not been developed. And I think the very hard part about that is, yes, in a grand concept, it sounds beautiful. And that's what we all want. We want to better the city and come up with a unified plan. Unfortunately, as I started talking with council members over the last couple of weeks, each of these individual parcels, short of the field that is immediately adjacent to where we are sitting tonight, are not owned by the city of Maryland Lake. They are all owned by individuals. And unless those individuals grant the right to determine who they are sold to, or grant the right to council and city to advertise that those properties are available, my understanding is that city council, mayor, and the city cannot advertise those properties. So as such, the property that's on the corner that we are all most concerned about, that Elaine Crane owns, as I understood it, the mayor went to her, from your comments last meeting, sir, that you said you went to her and you asked her if it would be something that we could work with her on. The question I guess I have, and I'll voice, is there a way that we can go to Elaine Crane either simply as an invitation to come to one of these meetings and discuss with the public her option? And I'm sure that has maybe been offered and you can weigh in on that. Or can we as community members go to her and tell her, and there are people in the room who know her, could we go and say, here are some of our concerns with the Summers Group plan. And we understand that they are a developer that directly approached you. I'm sure the Summers Group had some inside intelligence for the fact that, as he said, he did grow up here in the area. He knows the history of the area. But I think that there could be other developers that could be interested in this piece of property and maybe could come up with a mixed use plan that would be something that could be useful to our community. But my understanding is we as the city cannot advertise that piece of property unless we are granted the access to do so by the owner. And is there any way that we can approach her further as a council, as a city, or as community members? But I greatly appreciate the things that were said in the last few weeks. Last night, I walked out of here feeling extremely bolstered by the spirit and the olive branch that was offered across this group. I think it was a very positive night. I felt very positive walking out of here, and we greatly appreciate that you are listening to us and that you're supporting us as community members. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Going once. Figured you wouldn't pass up an opportunity.
Bill Claypool, Slide Road. I would like to hear Dr. Wilhelm's comments that we do appreciate involving the community. We now understand you are listening to the community people that you represent. Summers Group is clearly a class act. I think nobody in the community is questioning their ability to do good work, to make attractive dwellings and so on. It was very gratifying to have Greg Summers here and being candid and open and discussing with us. On a positive note, here's the way it works. When you have a project going to plan and everybody's been working hard, putting in time, like the mayor and the council, zoning, on the summer proposal, you get sort of vested in it. You've got time invested, energy invested. And when somebody tells you, we don't want that, that's a little bit painful. particularly if there's no alternative offer. Much better than if you say, we really don't like that proposal very well, but here's another option for you to consider. And a lot of the work you've already done prepares you for the option. You don't have to start from scratch. So to try to get an option moving forward, I've taken it on myself with the verbal support of a number of the other citizens from the community. Said, yeah, why don't you do that? And I contacted several other developers in the area. I'm not going to get into details right now, but of the 5 developers that I contacted, 3 of them would be interested in the Lane's property on the corner doing some kind of development. All 3 of them would be interested in something other than apartments. They would build apartments too, but they also build individual homes, they build condominiums, and so on. So there are people out there right now. In fact, one of them knows the property very well, knows the lane, has worked with the Summers Group, has nothing bad to say about the Summers Group. Just that they focus on apartments. By the way, just a little point, last night after the meeting, Greg kept saying, or during the meeting, these aren't apartments, they're townhouse rental homes. So Rhoda went on the website last night when we got home. And interesting, you look at the Meadows development that he had mentioned on there, it's quite a nice development. And the big broad headline says luxury apartments. Doesn't say rental home, it says apartments. So anyway, I've had some very positive feedback from 3 other well-known local, well-established developments. One of them that seems the most promising has done a number of condominium developments in Mentor, in the Mentor area, East Lake, and so on. And I'm going to be continuing to look into that. I don't have anything concrete to offer at this time, other than very positive vibes from other developers that, yeah, there are 2 parameters that we need to know. One is, how much is the lane willing to sell the property for? We don't have that number, at least I don't have the number. But I plan on talking to Elaine again. I saw her last week for a little while. I'll probably catch up to her again this week and say, look, there are some people interested in another option. Would you listen to what we have to say and see if she would be open to a backup plan? In case the Summers Group doesn't get what they want and decide that they don't want to move forward without the concessions they're asking for, maybe Elaine would consider a backup offer. So I will be pursuing that at the point where I get some concrete answers. The other print, the one is how much for the property. The other is the density. Now, the density in the current proposal of 35 or 2.6 acres is fairly high. It doesn't need to be anywhere near that high to make money, even on county benches. Monterey Bay has been mentioned another time. It's very nice. We ride our bikes through there, and it's very pleasant. Pastoral and so on. That's 6 per acre. Now, in order to maybe make the equation work, maybe 6 per acre is not enough, but maybe you don't need 14 per acre. Those are the 2 numbers that have to balance out: price for the parcel, construction cost, density of construction. And it sounds like the city has some flexibility on density. They've already tentatively approved a much higher density than what we've been talking about. So we may be able to back the density down and still get a developer that would be interested. I guess that's all I say. I really appreciate your continued patience. Please work with us. There will be some residents, maybe including me, but I'm hoping not, that are going to volunteer for the advisory, whatever the name of that committee was, that currently is unpopulated. The only question, who would be the council member that would represent on that committee, the Citizens Community Development Advisory Committee? That already been established?
There are no council members that serve on it. It is a board of the mayor. It is a board of the
That would be
mayor.
the mayor?
Nobody on the council would serve on it.
Okay, because in the city outline of positions, it says make it council members. They would certainly be more than acceptable.
Not aware that there's a space for council members.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Going once. Going twice. All right. Legislation before council, resolution number 2022-R-11. Could you please read it by its title?
Resolution number 2022-R-11, second reading. A resolution designating certain banking institutions to be eligible depositories for the active, inactive, and interim depositories of funds for the city of Mineral-on-the-Lake, Ohio, for a 5-year period commencing April 1, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Is there any motion? Motion to suspend.
Second.
Motions for this, motion to suspend by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Just as this took effect on April 1st, and here we are on May 10th, just now getting this approved. So I just want to make that clear that we're a little late on that one.
Anybody else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Motion for passage. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner for passage. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. The motion is passed. Resolution number 2022-R-12. If you please read it by its title.
resolution number 2022-R-12, second reading. A resolution designating certain banking institutions to be eligible depositories for the active, inactive, and interim depositories of funds for the city of Mineral-on-the-Lake, Ohio, for a 5-year period commencing April 1, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Again, this one was due April 1st as well.
I just have one question. If this was commencing April 1st, why did it come to us at the end of April? Why wasn't it brought forward earlier?
This was a cleanup from the audit.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Motion to approve.
Make motion.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. The motion is passed. Ordinance number 2022-0-005. Please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-05. Second reading, referred to zoning committee. An ordinance creating chapter 1255 Lakefront Planned Unit Development, PUD, District of the Codified Ordinances.
This is currently in the zoning committee. I am going to ask that if there's no objection from the zoning committee, that I remove it from you guys since I referred it to you and place it into the committee of the whole meeting. No objection from the zoning committee members? I didn't figure. I will schedule that meeting at the end when we get to announcements and settings of meetings. So that will now be referred to the committee of the whole. Ordinance number 2022-0-07, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-07. An ordinance to amend the 2022 appropriation ordinances and declaring an emergency.
Questions?
Mayor, do we have anything, any timelines on this?
No, this is just an accounting, request.
Any other questions?
So we're moving on from the CARES Act
To the ARPA, yes,
to the ARPA.
correct.
Did somebody remind me what ARPA stands for?
American Recovery Political Act, but the P may be wrong. Okay, but it's something like.
Oh, good. Nobody else knows. That's good. All right. Felt like I was left out there. All right. Is there any motions on this? Hearing none, we'll move on to second reading. Old business. Is there any old business for tonight? Hearing none. New business.
Mr. President, if I may, if you don't mind, Mr. Lyons, I'd like to bring up about the moratorium that I requested information for you. Is that okay?
I can't, but. Okay, whatever.
Okay. As many of you know, I did request support for a moratorium on dollar stores based on a heck of a lot of information that I received. I also did research on my own about how they're detrimental to the community. I believe that Mrs. Johnston also sent some stuff to all of us concerning that very factor. In asking Mr. Lyons if we could go forward with that, if I may put this in a nutshell, we can go forward with a moratorium on future ones, but not on the one that's currently in planning and zoning. But I do need a second co-sponsor for that. Is anyone interested?
I will refer that to the ordinance committee to discuss,
Thank you, sir.
since you guys were already going to discuss it. So. Any other new business?
Mr. Mayor, you said that you're going to get legislation together for the erosion.
Yes.
For us to.
Okay, Mr. Lyons.
Anybody else? Hearing none, we will now move it to open to the public to speak. Again, if you would like to speak, please come to the lectern and state your name and address for the record. Knew you wouldn't miss another opportunity.
That moratorium once, what was that all about?
That is to stop any more dollar stores
Oh,
from opening within the city.
okay, so at the moment, you're the only person that's, I mean, you're introducing or asking for.
I've introduced the idea to ordinance committee, and I also emailed all the rest of council, along with the information I had. But I also asked Mr. Lyons for his legal advice on this. It came down to that we can't necessarily stop this dollar store from coming in, but we could prevent any future dollar stores from coming in.
Right,
And there is a possibility if we act on this ordinance, or this suggestion, that it might deter this dollar store from wanting to open in a community that's put the moratorium on it. Who knows?
right. If, for example, you have a moratorium on rental properties. Because it's pretty clear that the dollar store part of the package that makes it attractive to them is they can make a bunch of money. On the 4 acres, the rest of the 4 acres, they're not gonna put the dollar store on. What I'd like to do, if it's appropriate, Mr. Lyons, is I have a copy of the moratorium that was passed by the city of North Florida. Can't say dollar store, but they apparently have better than, are you familiar with that?
I think they refer to it. as small box store.
Yeah, the small box for 3,000 to 15,000 feet. I just thought it
And
was,
it was already sent.
well, you already
I
have
like it. You're more than welcome to carry it. I received it. And I,
in Brunswick.
for what it's worth, I did research on the issue. Send out an opinion, I mean, it's legal advice, and I'm giving the council, it's not like they can do what they want with it.
Sure.
But, as part of that, I also thought to support communities that were maybe they wanted to
Toledo and Brunswick.
And I tried to talk to two of them. I talked to one of them. Their experience, what they had going on. I think, what I said. It's unfortunately not even a full question. Once you start the process, you can't yank the rug out from underneath.
Right, but we don't have to adjust the zoning for it. It's more attractive.
That's correct.
That's, I guess that would be.
Right, I mean, they have a right to what's there.
Absolutely.
Okay, and if they. Let's not talk about small box stores, but if somebody else needs one of the open lots and their application met the zoning requirements.
So we don't change zoning to make it work.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else from the
They
public?
can ask, they have a change.
Sure they can.
Right. That's good.
Anyone else from the public like to speak tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to announcements and settings and meetings. We're going to schedule a committee of the whole meeting to discuss the PUD. What's everybody's availability for next week? There's a BZA meeting already at 6 p.m. Everybody available Monday night, the 16th at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Monday night, 16th.
I think, but I'm not sure. I'm not saying no.
Okay, then we're gonna do 16th at 7 p.m. That will be a committee of the whole meeting to discuss the PUD proposal. All right, we also have Board of Zoning Appeals and a public hearing Monday, May 16th, 2022 at 6 p.m. We currently have scheduled the public hearing on ordinance 2022-0-05 for Tuesday, May 24th, 2022 at 7 p.m. That may be postponed. We won't know until we get here on the 24th.
Yeah, but we had an ordinance meeting scheduled for the 12th, but it's now conflicting. We have another date that everyone may be available for.
What do you have in mind?
Any day next week.
Monday,
Honestly,
16th.
I'm
How about
switching
Monday night
jobs.
at 7?
I'm switching jobs and Thursday just to be ahead.
Okay.
So
How
any
about,
day next week.
how about Wednesday, the 18th?
Wednesday, the 18th?
Yeah.
Okay.
At 7?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so that's an ordinance committee meeting Wednesday, May 18th at 7 p.m. Do you guys have a topic for that meeting, what you're going to cover? You guys have a long list of things that are on your
Yes,
backlog,
we
so
do.
can we
it's-
limit it to a couple things that we can work our way through?
Sure, let's complete the fences, the trees, and the
Right.
moratorium. I'm sorry,
Right away,
right away?
we were going to discuss nuisances.
Okay, so let's do right of way, fences, and the moratorium.
Okay.
Right-of-way fences and moratorium. So that still leaves rental inspections, point of sale inspections, golf carts, and CRA. You guys should schedule like a whole working week. That was sent by the chief.
Because now's the time,
He sent it to all of us, I believe, for
Okay,
all
so
the
let's
ordinance
add
committee
this.
members.
I didn't see it.
because he's been having.
I'll forward it to you.
plans
I'll have to find it again.
them up here, knowing
So we're gonna add golf carts to that.
Okay,
it's becoming over season. plans are different.
okay. So we're just gonna add golf carts to that. Yes.
Mr. Johnson, on the public hearing, we had advertised it, and if we can cancel it tonight, we can get it out on the website. Rather than, let's say, people are not here tonight, but they're geared up for the public hearing on the 24th. I don't necessarily know that we want people to show up and then say,
It's postponed?
Can I tell him why we talked to Mr. Lyons,
okay,
and the reasoning for postponing it is because then if we do decide on something, we don't have to do the advertising of 30 days again. So by postponing it, it still allows, we've already advertised, so that was our process behind that. We can make it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
I'm okay.
We could do either way.
No, I'm okay. I mean, I agree if we cancel it, we have to re-advertise. But we can announce, you could vote tonight to postpone it. So it gets out there on the website, so that people don't want to come. But then you should postpone it to a definite date. You can postpone it again. But just to let everybody know, you know, what's going on.
Do we want to postpone it until June? First meeting in June. It should be the 14th of June.
I'll make a motion.
Motion to postpone it to the 14th of June. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
All right.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. All right, the public hearing will be moved to the 14th of June at 7 PM. Are there any other committees that need to schedule a meeting?
Perhaps on the agenda, we can also indicate when we prepare. You know, that we indicate that the public hearing has been postponed for people to look at. And to the date that we just missed.
Any other meetings? Hearing none. So a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
All right.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned.